I hope everybody's doing okay today. This is Slaves of Satan part 55, and this is going to be one of the shorter ones, but in a way, depending on what you're looking for, possibly one of the most important and very critical and interwoven with the current state of affairs in society with this AI android robot cloning synthetic humanoid takeover, or whatever you want to call it. The technocracy, there's many words. But stay for the end for the shock. But I'm going to present evidence that's very rare to hear about. I have not seen any well, I haven't looked, but I have not seen anything in the algorithm about this. Something that I do take pride in, and not pride as in the type of sin, but something I'm proud of myself of, and something that I highly value myself doing in this series is presenting rare information. And while I've probably presented rare before to most people if they come across this and do their own research, once I show the evidence, it can really change the way you think about things. And I've made claims in the past that all this technology is not new, that we obviously had a long time ago. There's many routes you can go if down that rabbit hole. If somebody wants to do an expose about that, you can go the route of the antediluvian era. You can go the route of monolithic structures, ancient Egypt, Tartaria, statues that exist around the world of beings that are clearly holding a phone. But anyways, part 55, and this is actually the furthest I've gone back on the timeline so far to talk about a modern issue, because just like the book of Ecclesiastes say, nothing new under the sun. So Albertus Magnus, not many people know about him. He was a so-called Catholic saint, but for anyone that watches my videos, you know how I feel about the Catholic Church. Anybody that has any high position in that organization is legitimately evil. And maybe there's a confused priest here and there. And while I will maintain the innocence of most of the congregation, even though they don't have an excuse because they could research what organization they're a member of, when you start to get in the hierarchy of a modern Catholic Church, they all know that they're in a satanic organization. The Vatican is probably the biggest satanic cult in the world. So Albertus Magnus was one of these bishops that lived a double life, which many of them did. The majority of them was occultists. The other one that I did a video on, which he's one of the reasons that people believe this heliocentric nonsense, was Giordano Bruno. But that was around the 1500s. This is in the 1200s. So Albertus Magnus. But the shocking part will be at the end. His resume is pretty typical, but we'll look at it. Like I said, priest, bishop, theologian, botany. Botany is when you specialize in like flowers, plants, stuff like that, which is fine. because like I say, I like to humanize these people, because there is a character to these people beyond um beyond just the bad that they did. Um, uh, Study geography, and here we start astrology, something that's completely forbidden in the Bible, the good book. Condemned. The book of Isaiah is basically taunts the astrologers, and here you have someone who is labeled a saint practicing it, or just like Queen Elizabeth. She had John Dee, one of the black magicians that did the most damage to the entire planet, bringing in the Enochian system. He was her royal court astrologer. Now, he also studied astronomy. Now, there is a difference. One is the dark arts, and one is just a natural science. And if for somebody that does not know what is the difference, astrology is when you get into zodiacs, star constellations to predict the future, ritualistic themes through lunar cycles, stuff like that. Now, astronomy is what God actually tells us to study and understand in Genesis. I believe chapter 1. It's either towards the end of chapter 1 or the beginning of chapter 2. How the sky was how we observed what season we was in, what time of the day it was. So that's astronomy, and astronomy is not a dark art. That's something that God actually encouraged. Now, mineralogy, a lot of these occultists that were like before the 1600s, well, some of them still did it later too, but they were really into mineralogy, the study of stones, basically. They were really into alchemy and other types of arts that involved making things out of certain stones, and they believed that certain stones or different gems of different kinds would give you either a type of blessing or a type of protection or something like that. Right here, like I said, alchemy. Now, I would argue that alchemy in itself is not a forbidden art, but the way these people did it was wrong. Obviously, there's two basic types. Spiritual alchemy, that's when you get into the great work, the homunculi, golems, the rebus, stuff like that. And then natural alchemy, which is transmuting a substance. Now, if done in a natural, scientific way, without something that could disrupt the natural elements of the planet, then there would be nothing wrong with it. But like the main goal of physical alchemy was lead to gold. Obviously, that would disrupt everything. But like instant transmutation is what God would not want. Because if you study the Bible, especially Enoch, God was very, very strict about altering the natural process of the universe. But alchemy is basically just would have been just a more complicated form of basic chemistry, which God does not condemn. He was a zoologist. Nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Studied physiology. And physiologic is like the whole structure, the feeling of an animal or a person's body, like the best, or like the organs just being so different, or like, say something happens to you that causes you to like grow a giant fang. Like, I'll give two good examples. Like, one good example is these people that do these high-level satanic rituals, and they legitimately turn into a vampire, and their blood type changes, and it's no longer what is the type of blood that is in a basic man or woman. That's a physiological change. And another good example that I can think of is like a gray alien. Well, for the sake of time, I'm not explaining it, but if you watch these, you know that I've explained how they're not extraterrestrial, they're interterrestrial. Go see my George Adamski video, or my George Van Tassel video, for deep explanations into that. Now, he was studied phrenology, which that has been abandoned. And while I would not label it as a dark art, I would not even label it an occult art, or field of study instead of art, sorry. But I would say it's superstitious, and there's really nothing scientifically that can show that it's not just all in your head. Now, phrenology is where I believe it's either 12 or 14 different areas of the head that they have like mapped out on a chart, and based off the shape and the bumps of an area is how they would determine somebody's traits, personality, stuff like that. And while I think that's probably nonsense, physiognomy is not. Like, a physiognomist is somebody that studies somebody's facial features to be able to tell what type of mood that they're in. He studied justice, law, philosophy, friendship, love, jurisprudence, diplomacy. Now it'll be worth at the end. Natural magic. Now that can go either way if it's bad or not. Like some preachers that know the Word of God very well, but just did not really educate themselves on what is really what. Like, they'll condemn things like going out into the woods and picking herbs to make a natural remedy as natural magic and it being evil. Like, during the era of like when the Vatican got extremely superstitious, when they were the ones that was actually practicing black magic all along, while it's probably a lot worse nowadays. But like, the priests and stuff just got so superstitious. So like, the natural magic, I would say that's a case by case basis on if it's bad or not. But that's so broad of what it can be talking about. Now, he made talismans. And typically, when you hear about talismans, it'll be based off one of the planets. Well, if you've watched these, you know that, my opinion on what they actually are. They're not, none of them is something that we can land on. The Book of Enoch tells you what they are. So, but a good example about a talisman would probably be when Joseph Smith died, the founder of the Mormon Church. He had a talisman of Jupiter in his pocket. And the talisman of Jupiter is supposed to grant you success with women and political power, because he was running for president at the time. He studied charms, which the difference is the talismans is something that grants you something, while charms are more for a protection. And with talismans is when you'll get into using stones typically, but charms will have different, like, crystals and stuff, or like weird things like a rabbit's foot and stuff like that. Last two things. So, before the whole reason why this is being made, the secondary reason is he's among one of the list of people that you always hear about that supposedly pulled off making the Philosopher's Stone. And if you read enough, watch enough documentaries, listen to other people of high intelligence, study the past, look at different accounts, it's more than obvious that people have been seeking death for thousands and thousands of years. Rather it's through becoming a gibberim, a cloning, humanoids, the Great Work, the Philosopher's Stone, Ambrosia, the Gold Juice, the Fountain of Eternal Youth, whatever legend you want to look at, it has happened. If you like, look into celebrities that look like people from the past that were famous, or pharaohs or something, it's very clear that something is going on. Very, very, very clear. And in case you don't know what the Philosopher's Stone is, it's an alchemical concoction of something that I don't really want to say what the main ingredient is, because I just don't want to throw the idea out there of somebody attempting to make that and tempting somebody to sin. But if you need motivation not to do it, once you achieve that, you no longer have your salvation if you become immortal on this earth. And that's what people are doing. They're becoming immortal on this earth because one of the ways they do this is they become one with the fallen angels, and some of them shapeshift into other people, or because they have to maintain the act that they're actually dying so their plot don't get spilled to the whole world. And while there's been so many whistleblowers, some deceased and some still doing it like me, they know that if they just decide just to make a body live forever, that everybody will go into mass panic. And what they're really scared of is people humbling themselves and turning back to God, because then they are no longer in power. They will lose. And God will answer the prayers of the nation. And I believe there's, like, this country is on the verge of a major pendulum shift, and a lot of people feel that way. Anyways, so while things like AI will tell you, or even like official websites, they'll tell you that the word android, I think they don't even tell you it's 100 years old. Or the oldest that I could find a website tell you that it is from the 1700s. But in the mid 1200s, and this is not a book, it's a medieval text that recently started getting talked about again. I have to look into who found it and who brought to the attention of the people. Either just almost no one has heard about this, or it just gets shadow banned in every place. But Albertus Magnus created an android. Same thing as I would say probably more advanced than these stupid Tesla bots. Was made in the 1200s. I'll post what they're calling the book now, because it did not have a name, because it was not one of the books that was published by Albertus Magnus. It was a loose text, but it has been verified. But see, they was using the word autonomous back then. But people should not have known that word back then. This should be like startling to somebody, especially if you're not a very big believer in the supernatural world. And it's honestly, like, I'll admit, it's scary to know that people was able to make this stuff back then. If we knew of all the black science projects that's made right now, we would probably never have a second of mental peace. And I believe that's why God hasn't revealed it to anybody yet, or exposed it, because He knows that for our own good we're not ready yet. Now, one of his students, Thomas Aquinas, destroyed it. Now, he doesn't really give a good answer of why he destroyed it, but supposedly this thing they described it as an artificial human, and it could answer any question, supposedly. So basically, they made an AI humanoid in the 1200s. If I didn't know any of this stuff, and just this fact alone would make me question all of reality. And thankfully, for 17 years now, I've been looking into as much of the world as I possibly can to get the truth about it, because the origin of almost everything is a lie. Like the most basic one that most people know is that Christopher Columbus discovered America, when that was not even his name. It was discovered and a civilized location so long before that. But the origin of almost everything is a lie. That they tell you in the schools, which would be called indoctrination camps. The biggest being how old the world is. The world is not even 6,000 years old yet. But yeah, in the 1200s, there was an AI, synthetic humanoid, robot, cyborg, android, whatever you want to call it. Now the word android, since they spoke Latin, it was worded slightly different, but it translates right over to what would be android. Or another example is the Book of Enoch, which is thousands of years old. It talked about portals by the word, when that was completely unknown too. And like just the way the Book of Daniel says that God will show the people that in the Book of Daniel, it says that knowledge will increase the further life goes on. And a really good example of that is when you open the Book of Enoch. It says, and I'm paraphrasing here, but basically it says that this scripture was preserved for a certain generation. Because, see, if we would have discovered those Dead Sea Scrolls and found the Book of Enoch in, say, the 1700s, 1800s, it would not have made sense. 1947 was the perfect time for it to be found. And if this thing about Albertus Magnus's android came to light, even like any more than 100 years ago, most people would have, well, I'll say 150, because there was that Metropolis, that satanic movie Metropolis. But yeah, if that don't if that don't shock the nervous system to an unbeliever that just believes in the most cookie cutter worldview, then I'm not sure what really else would. And I'm going to keep on making these. I know the algorithm does not like it. And I do take requests. If there is something that you want me to cover, I'll make them. I have no problem making things beyond these Slaves of Satan series. This is my specific calling, because what my main skill other than the Bible is studying these individuals from the past and putting together the missing pieces of history, what happened to the world, morality, things like that. But yeah, pretty unbelievable. Have a good rest of the day.